Welcome, friends, to At Home with Theosophy. This is our last class for this series, the series based on the book by Annie Besant, In the Outer Court. And today we are going to explore the last chapter on the threshold.
So far in the book, what we have done is, in metaphorical terms, is we've gone from the well-worn path of religion up the side of the mountain with the swiftness of travel, as Annie Besant says. We get to this gate that says service of man, and we can get up the side of the mountain through ambition and self-serving means. But once we get to that gate that says service of man, we can go no further unless we completely realize that everything we do is for humanity and not for self-seeking reasons. So now we're in the outer court, and Annie Besant tells us once we're in the outer court, there is a definite of purpose and a deliberateness of action. And with these two aspects, what we do is we begin the purification. And this purification is from the lower is to help our lower nature vibrate more with our higher nature. Then through this deliberateness, we set out to conquer the lower nature through thought control. And our building of character is because that part of our nature is both a citadel and a gateway to seeking for truth. Then through spiritual alchemy, we transmit from the gross to refined. And now we come upon the threshold of the golden gates, as she says. And with this, when the aspirant is here, they are definitely and clearly understanding of what they are aspiring to. So
let us start with the subject of today.
Where we are on the threshold. So just to explain again, once we've come into the outer court, we've passed through the outer court, and as she will explain here, we're now at the gates of gold that will go into the inner court and then enter the Holy of Holies. Those in the outer court, they differ very much in their mental and in their moral qualities. They differ very much in the progress that they have made. They differ in the qualifications which they have already obtained, in their fitness to pass onwards. But one thing they all seem to have in common is earnestness. They have a definite and clear purpose before them, and this is perhaps the most salient characteristic and the one which, as I said, is common to all.
So the idea of the people in the outer court, or that stage of spiritual growth that is represented by being in the outer court, it's basically, as Annie Besant says, if we are trying to see what is common to this stage, is this idea of the clear purpose in our lives. We all are different. We all grow in different ways. Normally, we don't grow in a very smooth way. There are some areas of our personality that are strong and some other areas of our personality that need development, and they are all different in different people. But what they all have in common is that they have realized that life is not a place merely to enjoy, to further my personal ambitions, to attain this or that. All those things became secondary just as a natural result of the awakening of spiritual wisdom to some extent. Therefore, this stage of growth is one in which people look at life as this ground to discover truth and to help others discover truth.
Yeah, this part of in the outer court, as she says, this earnestness, I think here between the earnestness and the deliberateness and the definiteness of purpose, this is where I feel like all doubt is removed. We no longer, when we're in the outer court, we no longer think, well, maybe this is what I should do, or maybe this is how I should do it. You just go forward and get it done. If you look at some of the ancient books, you will find that heedlessness is marked as one of the most dangerous of failings. Earnestness, on the other hand, as one of the most valuable of attainments. It matters not to what religion you turn, you will find on this a perfect unanimity.
Unanimity.
Heedlessness is an unmindfulness, a carelessness, an unthoughtfulness in action. So yeah, besides the no doubting any longer, it's a specific and very pointed, one-pointedness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and for example, in a typical description in the Hindu literature of the qualifications to enter the temple in this metaphor is what they call mumukshutva, that is desire for liberation, in the sense that again, what we were saying, the person lives from the point of view of the spiritual path, that whatever that person does has to lead to, in the context of Hinduism, has to lead to liberation, to moksha. As we said, in the context of Theosophy, in order to get in touch with the masters, service has to be the motivation, because the masters are enlightened beings that have a specific role in the world. Their role is to help humanity. So what they are seeking is for people who want to participate in that particular role. People can attain liberation by other means without coming in touch with the masters. But what the masters are seeking are people who want to participate in that specific role, and then they intervene in the spiritual growth of the person to make it faster, although that means more challenging too. And the reason why they try to bring the person as fast as possible to wisdom, let's say, is so that that person can help humanity as soon as possible.
While the aspirants are in the outer court, the initiations are those of life. They are not the clear and definite initiations that come later, not those definite steps which are within the temple, the first of which comes on the passing through the golden gates, but they are constant initiations which come as the candidate is going along the path of his daily life, so that in a very real sense, life may here be said to be the great initiator, and all the ordeals through which the candidate is passing here in this life thus prove his strength and develop his faculties.
So this is, the idea of initiation, which we will see in this class. It's an idea that can be understood in many different contexts. So Annie Besant says, while in the stage of growth that we call the outer court, while we are there, we can say that we pass through initiations, using that term in a different way than she's going to use it later. In the sense that we go through ordeals. Normally the idea of initiation is there is an ordeal. That ordeal we have to go through, and then after going through that ordeal, there is some kind of growth, of inner growth, that comes as a result of that. So as the candidate goes through life, all the difficulties that the candidate has may become an initiation in this sense of the word. For many people, difficulties are things that they try to escape from, to resist. They get resentful about all these difficulties. For the person in the outer court, all these ordeals, although never pleasant, and they are painful and they cause difficulties, because of the attitude of the person in the outer court and the willingness to face these difficulties and to work with them, they become like initiations. But these are informal initiations in a sense, as Annie Besant says.
These can be in life, we think of those things, an initiation or in life have these certain aspects to it. So it has the building up of difficulties that at one point we don't think that we can surmount. And then there is this threshold that we have to go over, like this peak, and then we go over it. And after it's finished, we have just a little bit widening of a perception or an expanding of our consciousness, even if it's just a little bit. In the Native American traditions, a lot of time these are called rites of passage, and they used to have specific ceremonies. And I think we've lost a lot of these ceremonies that help kind of train the personality as to what an initiation is.
Mm-hmm. So there are also, as Annie Besant is going to explain, initiations into the occult path. And these are formal initiations. They happen on the inner planes to the soul rather than to the physical personality. And they involve something far more complex than our experience in daily life. The first initiation is what marks the person passing through this threshold into the inner court of the temple through these golden gates that Annie Besant talks about.
If you turn to the little treatise, Light on the Path, you will find that certain conditions are there laid down, which are said to be written in every antechamber of any lodge of a real brotherhood. It is said that the meaning of the first phrase, before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears, is that the soul must pass out of the life of sensation into the life of knowledge, behind and beyond the place where the soul is constantly shaken by these vehement vibrations that come by way of the senses, into the region of knowledge, where there is fixity, where there is calm, and where there is peace. Before we go into this, because we're only going to cover two of the truths here, the other two truths are the, and we'll go ahead and mention them after we finish this, but if you read the book, there are 4 truths that she speaks of, and we're going to go over 2 here.
Yes, Light on the Path opens with this form, before this, before this, before this. And Besant says the first 2, which are the ones she's going to develop, belong to the conditions to go through this threshold. So you see that the first one that Light on the Path opens with, before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears. And she says this is referring to this struggle in our lives, or this, I would say, this kind of, we are slaves of sensation. Nor as generally in humanity, we do what makes us feel good. We approve what makes us feel good. This method of meditation makes me feel good, therefore it's good and it's spiritual and it's profitable. This method of meditation is hard, so I don't do it. You see, we tend, even in the spiritual life, to judge things based on sensations, how something makes us feel. And as long as that is our state of consciousness, then we are constantly being thrown here and there by the always changing sensations. She says, before the person can enter the temple, go through these golden gates, there has to be this maturity in which sensations become secondary. And the fixity of knowledge, as she says, not knowledge as information, but knowledge of I know, the idea that I know this is what I should do, regardless of how this makes me feel, that is one of the preconditions to go through the first initiation.
Pablo said that about the sensations, but nowhere does she say that the sensations go away. Mm-hmm. The sensations no longer are a pull for us to go here and there. Mm-hmm.
Sensations, yes, that's an important point. Sensations are a necessary part of life, of our being. Annie Besant many times mentions with the spiritual growth, sensations get, if anything, they get stronger or keener. The person becomes far more sensitive. You can see there are some people that are very dull or self-centered, or to call their attention, they need a strong impact or a shout, or life needs to shake them so that they perceive what is going on. With the disciple, a little whisper is enough for the disciple to realize something. So sensations grow keener, and yet there is this raising above sensation, so that even though the sensation is there, it doesn't have the power to drag consciousness.
It is said that the eyes are the windows of the soul, and those windows may be blurred by all the effects of these vivid sensations, whether of pleasure or of pain. The soul cannot see clearly when it looks through the windows because of this mist that comes from the outer world, from the personality, a mist that is the result of mere vivid sensation and not of the understanding of life. Until the windows of the soul no longer are dimmed, until they are clear and the light of knowledge comes through them, it is impossible that the eyes of the soul shall really see.
So this is just following with the metaphor, how when sensations just blind our intelligence, then of course we end up doing what the sensation is calling for, and not what our knowledge or reason says that is the right thing. We can always make a mistake. The process of growth in the occult path is not getting rid of mistakes, because mistakes are inevitable. The idea is that when the soul makes a mistake, it makes a mistake simply because the soul couldn't see better or deeper, but not because the soul was taken over by sensations, desires, this or that.
And we talked about this process in the past. We all know how difficult it is at times to overcome. We know what we're supposed to do, or we know which way to go, and our sensation just kind of pulls us, and we blink and we're there. We knew we should go right and we're left. So a lot of those are sensations or patterns that are deeply grooved within our personality. And so it's not, the ideal at first is to become aware that these sensations are pulling us left instead of when we want to go right. And through that awareness gives us the power or the strength to create that space that can give us a little extra time to react to the way we want it to go.
Now here,
the way that's the greater good. I hate right and wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Here we are talking about the approaching the end of human evolution as we know it. So this is a high state of consciousness and understanding. Once the first initiation or the person goes through the first initiation, then the end of evolution is at hand. It may take a few lifetimes, as Annie Besant would say, but it is basically done.
The end of their evolutionary.
Yes, they are of that particular person, because after that person finishes, the evolution that is available with the experiences that the earth can provide, then that person becomes a Mahatma to help all the other people that are still going around the mountain. So you will see here that we are talking about things that may seem, some perfection that may seem unattainable, but what the book is doing is showing us the future. The book was little by little bringing or presenting the preparation that eventually leads in this direction.
And this is what we have to look forward to. No more of that wavering back and forth. No more of, I wanted to do this, but I did that. No more of that doubt. And I just got, from listening to Pablo and reading this, I just got what a relief or a pleasure to be at that, a freedom to be at that point. Mm-hmm. Not that the disciple will lose his sensitiveness, but that nothing that comes from without will be able to throw him from his balance. Not that he will cease either to suffer or to enjoy, for it is said that he will both suffer and enjoy more keenly than other men, but that neither the suffering nor the joy will be able to shake him in his purpose, to shake him from that point of equilibrium, which comes from the steadiness of the knowledge that he has obtained. This knowledge is the understanding of the permanent, and therefore of the incapacity of the transitory and the unreal to throw any definite veil over the vision of the soul.
So this is what we were mentioning. And you see, in modern spirituality, there is many times the idea that you are spiritual and then you will have eternal happiness. You will never suffer again. You will have this bliss. And ancient approaches don't agree with that. If you see the Bhagavad Gita, for example, in Hinduism, they define the yogi not as a person that never suffers and that is always in a state of joy, but a person that is immutable in facing suffering or facing pleasure. Suffering and pleasure, even the very fact of being in a body, which is material and limited, will always be a source of pleasure and suffering, pleasure and pain. And psychologically too, our mind, our emotions will always experience both things. This constant bliss exists on planes that are not material, let's say. So Annie Besant here again is saying the same. It's not that the obliteration of suffering, it's that suffering becomes irrelevant from a certain point of view.
This makes me think of in our human evolution, just from birth to death, that we have these stages. As a child, we can't wait till we're a teenager. As a teenager, we can't wait until we're an adult. As an adult, we can't wait for retirement. So all those bring, and we think it's going to be much better. Life is going to be much better, much different at that point. And it's never really that different. You know, it comes with more responsibility. It comes with, you know, a little more awareness of what's going on in the world, which can create a little more doubt or,
Yeah. The difference is more in how we deal with the experiences of the world. The experiences of life will be the same, but the maturity acquired allows a person to relate to them and to go through them in a very different way.
And so, with the second truth, before the ear can hear, it must have lost its sensitiveness. It must have reached the place of silence. And the reason for this is that though the voice of the masters be always sounding in the world, men's ears do not hear the voice while they are filled with the sounds of the outer life. Therefore, it is necessary that, while still in the outer court, the disciples shall reach a place of silence in order that the true sound may be heard.
So this, the first one was before the eyes can see or the soul can see, and now this is before the ear or the soul can hear. And the idea is that as long as we are constantly distracted by the promises of the world, the aims that the physical plane puts before us, or even the emotional and mental dimensions of life puts before us, as long as we are listening to all the voices that are clamoring for our attention, we are not going to be able to hear the voice of the master in the sense of the spiritual voice. The spiritual voice is like this very soft voice that is constantly speaking, but we are in a party having fun and loud music and talking, and we can never hear that. So before the first initiation, the disciple or the aspirant undergoes a gradual transformation in his or her consciousness, in which silence begins to be more important, in which there is not so much constantly running after the objects of the senses. And then the soul can hear.
And here, the same writer speaks of the difficulty and the struggle which come when first the silence is felt. Accustomed as we are to all the sounds around us, when silence for a moment falls upon the soul, it comes with the sense of nothingness. It is like entering into an abyss in which there is no footing, passing into a darkness which seems like a dark cloud which has fallen on the soul, a sense of absolute loneliness, of absolute vacuity, a feeling as though everything had given way, as though all life had vanished with the cessation of the sounds of living things.
This is part of the experience. Many people experience this at the beginning when facing this silence of or the absence of sensation, the absence of distraction, the absence of thoughts. That state is felt as an emptiness, as a vacuum that scares people or made them feel uncomfortable. That feeling of I am dying, because everything that I am identified with and that I'm familiar with, my sensations, my thoughts, my emotions, all that is falling away. And then what am I? So at the beginning, when facing silence in meditation or even in life, the night of the senses that St. John of the Cross talks about is this experience when the person begins to lose his or her attraction to the normal things of life. There comes this sense of emptiness. And that is a threshold that has to be passed through in order to find ourselves on the other side.
And once again, we can find this in everyday life that we're doing. It's that time where we've reached some pinnacle, and all of a sudden we're no longer there, and we're like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And so we know, I remember this specifically, when my kids were able to eat and take care of themselves at a picnic, and they were all sat down, they all were eating, and I sat there, and for a moment there was this void, and I was like, what do I do? So those little moments in our lives that happens, or with retirement, when we retire, there is a small sense of void that we're thinking, okay, so this is what I've been doing all this time, now what? So those are the same sort of little thresholds that we go through every day. And if we can fall back on those, we can remember the process that we go through and know that, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to feel like, and I'm not dying, but this is what's going to be the outcome of it. It is said that though the Master himself be there, and beholding the hand of the disciple feels as though his hand were empty, that he has lost sight of the Master and of all that have gone before him, and seems to himself as though poised alone in space, with nothing above or below or on either hand. And it is across that silence that the voice sounds from the other side. The voice which once heard in the silence is heard forevermore amidst all the sounds. This always reminds me about that poem, Footprints in the Sand, where the man talks about walking with Jesus, and then he says, Jesus, in times of trouble, how come there was only one footprint? You left me, I was abandoned, I felt lonely. And Jesus says to him, no, actually, I was carrying you during that time. So this is that same thing. It's that feeling, that sensation, that void that we have that brings up that fear. That's really an illusionary fear. It's not what really is.
Mm-hmm. And that is something that it's important to learn how to go through, because it is in the silence that the lower self dies, or at least an aspect of the lower self dies. Because the lower self is based on memory, thoughts, desires, hopes, plans, regrets, all this. So as the process of spiritual growth proceeds, and the soul begins to leave behind all those things, there will come the moment, or it's not necessarily one moment, but it may be an experience that comes gradually every now and then, where we have to accept, to let go, to die to the past. And for the moment, there is nothing, and we have to be able to be comfortable with the nothingness. And then the lower self dies.
And most of us are planners, are doers. We control we try to control things anyway. And so the real gift or the practice is in the everyday. Notice where we control something or where we've planned things so that there's something right after the other, and learn to live or learn to pause in the unknown and see what that feels like. See what our emotions do, our thoughts do, our sensations do, and see that that unknown isn't necessarily a scary place or a fearful place. And these two truths, it is said, must be felt, must be experienced before the real golden gates can be touched. These two truths must be realized by the aspirant before he can stand on the threshold and there await permission to enter within the temple itself.
So this is part of the training, the final training within the outer court before the candidate is fit to go through the first initiation or to pass through the golden gate.
I always called it the gates of gold.
Yeah, they are called in both ways.
Okay. All right, the path of initiation. So now the aspirant has passed from the outer court over the threshold through the gates of gold or golden gates into the inner court. And in this inner court now, there are 4 initiations. Dare we, for a moment, stand on the threshold itself, glancing forward, in order that we may realize still more clearly what lies in front. By this, the aspirant can understand more clearly why such conditions are made, and why, in the outer court, the aspirant must practice the lessons we have been studying. Just for a moment, let our eyes rest on the 4 paths, or the 4 stages of the one path, that lie within the temple, each with its own portal, and each portal one of the great initiations. The first, that which you will find so often described as the initiation which is taken by him who enters on the stream, marks a step definite and clear. It makes the passage over the threshold into the temple from which no one ever again goes forth, returning backwards into the world. He goes not forth, for he is ever in the temple, even when he is serving in the world itself.
This idea of entering the stream comes from the Buddhist tradition. Maybe the metaphor there is we are on a land that is harsh, arid, and is not good, and we are all on a pilgrimage to get to the promised land, and there is a river in between the two. So the first initiation marks the entering in the stream, and then through the initiations, one gets to the other shore, which symbolizes liberation or something like that.
In a note of The Voice of the Silence, it is said that it is very, very rarely that a Chela entering the stream reaches the goal in the same life. Generally, there are 7 lives that stretch in front of him, through which he must pass ere the last step be taken. But it may be as well to remember, perhaps, in reading all these books, that these phrases must not be taken too definitely. For the lives are effects, and these lives are not measured always by mortal births and mortal deaths. They are stages of progress, perhaps more often than human lives. Still, they are sometimes measured between cradle and grave, although not necessarily.
If we read this in the context of the Theosophical view of evolution, we have been evolving for millions and millions of years, and for the natural evolution, there are still millions and millions of years in the future. We are only halfway of the process of evolution. So even 7 more lifetimes is a very short period. Now, Annie Besant says that idea of the 7 lives between the first and the 4th initiation may not even imply 7 new births. In many of these words in the occult literature are more kind of allegorical or symbolical. But in a certain sense, there has to be 7 major deaths and rebirths in a person until that person goes through the last initiation, the 4th initiation.
And these are said to be passed life after life without break, passing from one to another, passing onwards constantly without break in self-consciousness. As these lives are lived, certain last weaknesses are cast off one by one completely, no longer now the incomplete labors of the outer court. Here, each work that is undertaken is perfectly achieved. Each task that is begun is perfectly finished, and we see that in each of these stages certain definite fetters, as they are called, are cast aside, as the disciple advances onwards to perfection, onwards to the full manifestation of the divine in man. And these fetters are ties, chains that tie us to earthly life or tie us to the outer court from the inner court.
Yes, we did with Michele a previous webinar, The Secret Path, where we talked specifically about all these initiations, and we mentioned the fetters. So if you are interested, you can.
And that comes from Buddhism. That's a Buddhism term, and the enter of the stream, that's a Buddhist term for these initiations.
Yes, the Blavatsky first, and then Besant Leadbeater, they borrowed from the description in Buddhist scriptures, then also from Hinduism. Now in the Buddhist scriptures, you won't see a clear reference to initiations. What they talk about are different degrees of enlightenment, for example, something like that.
Or these steps towards the other shore.
Yes. The idea of the initiations was a secret teaching in the past. And so in the early literature, you just see them as stages. But let me say something about this. So the idea is that after the first initiation, there is incarnation normally without a rest in between that is called in Theosophy the Vachan.
I think we talked about that last week.
Okay,
yeah.
So the idea is that after we die, consciousness is tired of going through the physical plane. We may be attached to life because it's the only thing that we know. But when consciousness lets go of the physical body, it is felt as a liberation. It is felt as leaving behind a kind of hellish experience in comparison to the experience on the inner planes. And consciousness is really tired and needs time to rest, to recuperate on the higher planes where there is no suffering, no limitations, nothing that is disturbing.
It's also a time to assimilate all the good things that we've done in each life. So it's a rest, recuperation, and a time for assimilation, just like we do each day when we go to sleep at night and we assimilate what we need to in the day. Sorry.
But in these last stages of evolution, the idea is that rest is given up so that the work can be done as soon as possible. So maybe it would be something like, okay, you work straight for 4 days without sleeping, if that is possible. But basically it would be a sacrifice like that. And then the work is done. And this is without losing self-consciousness. It's like, because the breaks are so long between life and life, when we come back, we don't remember anything that happened in the previous lifetime. But because these incarnations are so fast, then there is a thread of self-consciousness that is kept.
And we do that. We have, our regular work week is 5 8-hour days, but say a nurse could work 4 12-hour days and then have 3 hours off. So that's something similar. And then beyond that, first is another portal, another initiation. Of the second initiation is said that he who passes it shall receive birth but once more. Only once more must he necessarily return, ere his compulsory round of births and deaths are over. Many times he may return to voluntary reincarnation, but that will be of his own free will in service, and not by the binding to the wheel of births and deaths. We've studied this quite a few times before, but just this time now, in reading this, I really see the beauty or the bliss in it, and how coming back to service can really be joyful if we're not bound by that wheel.
Mm-hmm. This is how what we discussed about suffering and sacrifice. The soul on the inner planes, any of us when we are on the inner planes, as I said, there is no limitation, there is no hunger, there is no need, there is no fear, there is no pain, there is nothing of that. All that belongs to the limitation of the lower planes. So the soul on its when the soul is at home on the higher planes, there is only bliss and there is only understanding and love and all this. And every time that there is incarnation, to some extent, there is a giving up of this. Because even though the enlightened being can retain that, it is still submitted to the limitations of the body. And as we were saying, the body will hurt and the emotions will react and the mind will do this and that. And although the enlightened being is beyond that in a certain sense, the sensations are all there. It's like if you don't like a horror movie, you know it is a movie, but they force you to sit down and watch the movie, and you know it's a movie and it's unpleasant. You may say, well, it's just a movie, but I would rather be watching the sunset. So to some extent, there is a sacrifice there, but also because the enlightened being realizes the true nature of everything and that sensations are illusory, and because of this true love and compassion, that sacrifice is joyfully taken in order to help humanity. So that is the joy. Just like, as we said before, the mother getting up to feed the baby, it is a sacrifice, but it's a joyful one.
Yes, and to go, that's what I was going to say was, and once again, it's the same thing as when we go to sleep at night. When we go to sleep at night, most of the time, we're in this blissful sleep, this pleasant state where our back pains or our knee pains from the day are gone, our work is gone, and we get that short, that short devachanic or short rest, and then we have to wake up again, and we have to come back to our work and our pains and our aches. So.
Mm-hmm. So after the second initiation, there is only one more necessary incarnation. And then that soul is free, is liberated. If the soul wants, that soul doesn't need to incarnate any longer. Everything is done on the lower plane. However, those souls that go through the process of initiation is because they accept to keep on reincarnating whenever necessary to help humanity.
And this is a point I think we mentioned last time. This is where Blavatsky sometimes talks about the path of selfishness and the path of renunciation. But remember that path of selfishness, she's only using to illustrate an example.
Contrast it.
To contrast, to kind of exemplify the path of renunciation. But that path of selfishness, we don't really know. We know that there are other paths, but we don't know exactly what they are. As he passes through that stage and reaches the third portal, the third great initiation, he becomes the one who receives birth no more. For in that very birth, he shall pass through the fourth stage, which takes him to the threshold of nirvana, and there can be no law that binds the soul, for every fetter is broken and the soul is free. The fourth stage is that of the Arhat, where the last remaining fetters are utterly thrown aside.
So the Arhat in this context is the soul that is complete, that has accomplished everything that a human being can accomplish. It is done, the work is done, it is over. So the soul could go into nirvana and just rest for the remaining of the cycle of evolution, where all the other souls in humanity are still working to attain that perfection. And then that soul would come out of nirvana when a new cycle of evolution starts. According to the Theosophical tradition, will come as a celestial being in a different kingdom of nature, let's say. But in this case, as we were saying, instead of doing that, the soul chooses to remain. This is like the Bodhisattva path in Mahayana Buddhism. The soul refuses to stay in nirvana until the whole of humanity or sentient beings get into nirvana. Of course, at the end of evolution, all the divine sparks will go back to nirvana, and that is where the bodhisattva is also in nirvana. Then with the new cycle of evolution, the sparks that had not accomplished everything that was needed will incarnate again as a human being or an animal or whatever they were before. But this is basically the idea in the bodhisattva tradition too.
So basically, if you're not to the top of the mountain when the new evolutionary scheme comes, you start where you ended up.
Yeah, but in between is like you rest on the top of the mountain.
Right.
Here the allegory doesn't
Right.
work.
Yeah.
In between you are in nirvana, although it's a less conscious nirvana, more like a deep sleep. And then in the new cycle of evolution, we'll continue at the same point.
But you don't go backwards, because you mentioned animals, so you don't go backwards.
No, but if the animal didn't attain the passage to a human
Right.
kingdom, in the next evolutionary cycle, will continue in the animal evolution.
Can we trace in any fashion at all these last stages, these 4 steps of initiation? Can we realize, however dimly, what the work is which makes the passing of these 4 gateways possible, and which makes the changed life on the other side? We may ask ourselves how it is that the demands are so rigid before the threshold is crossed. Why is it that so much has to be done before the entrance into the temple is permitted, before those who hold the key of the gate will throw it open when the aspirant stands thereat for admission?
So yeah, she's going to justify why all this work is necessary before getting into the first initiation.
Every step that he takes on the other side is a step that places greater and greater powers within his grasp. Within the temple, his eyes will be open. He will be able to do and live in a way that on the hither side is impossible. This will make him a man very different from those around him, holding powers that they do not share, having vision that is not theirs, knowledge in which they have no part. But if that be so, it is needful to demand from him that he shall truly be somewhat different from them ere these powers shall be placed within his grasp. For once possessed, he holds them and can use them.
So this is the idea, with great power comes great responsibility. And that is exactly one of the reasons why there is so much qualifications that the masters expect from the aspirant to initiation, because that person may become very dangerous to the world if the person doesn't have this purity. As we said in other classes in this webinar, if I get angry, my power to do damage is relatively small. But if I have a lot of power and I get angry, then the power of destruction is far greater. So right. The person that will hold those powers has to be a person that can outgrow all these human weaknesses.
Right, and I was just going to say, and we can see that in daily life with people who were insignificant until they gained power, and then their anger or their frustration or their jealousy or whatever it is really could affect a greater amount of people.
Yes, and also there is a psychological question that many people are good just because they cannot be bad. They don't even have the power to be bad. But once people come into power and they have all these possibilities and they have all these temptations, then they become corrupt. We see this constantly in humanity. So exactly the same may happen with the disciple after initiation, unless that person has already left behind those weaknesses, because power corrupts.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Suppose then that he had the weaknesses so common in the outer world that he has easily irritated by the faults of those around him, or that he was easily thrown off his balance by the common events of daily life. Suppose that his temper was not well under control, that his compassion was not growing, that his sympathy was not wide and deep, that when another injured him, he felt anger instead of compassion, and irritation instead of forgiveness. What would be the result of admitting such a man beyond the threshold and allowing these powers to pass within his grasp?
So this is where we all are to a greater or lesser extent, and this is part of the reason why we are going through all this work that Annie Besant described here.
Would there not be the danger, nay, the certainty, that these small faults, so common in men and women in the world, would bring about results of the nature of catastrophes? That if he were angry, these fresh powers of the soul he has gained, the strength of his will, the power of his thought, would make him a source of danger to his fellow men, as these forces were flung out and affected others. We can see this similarity in all of the stories of what do you call them, the
wizards or things like that.
What about Spider-Man and
superheroes?
Sorry, in all the superheroes, there's always the nemesis who has the same power as the good guy, and this guy uses his powers for evil. So, this is not uncommon.
Mm-hmm. What we have to mention here is that initiation it's something that will stimulate all these powers that are latent in all human beings, but that the souls don't develop until very late in the evolutionary journey, when going slowly around the mountain, and when they gain it naturally. All these weaknesses, because it was so slow, all the weaknesses had been left behind, far earlier. But during initiation, there is a concentration of all these. There is an artificial stimulation of these powers, which will be needed to help the world, and that is the only reason why these powers are stimulated. But then, to wield these powers, that person has to be beyond.
And it is said that that's why the masters don't encourage people to come forward or to say, I want to be a disciple, make me a disciple, please, I want, let me in. Because all this, with all these warnings, I used to give the example that I want to be Superwoman or Wonder Woman. And they tell me, well, it comes with disappointment, you don't get the love you want, the romance that you want, you can't have this, you can't have this, but all I'm focused on is those powers, and I promise to use them for good. But without all this slower pathway, those devices, those personality parts of myself are going to strengthen as soon as I get those powers. And so Deborah asks, does good always win?
Well, depends on what you mean by always, in the sense that on the higher planes, there is no room for evil. On the lower planes is where evil is the strongest. And in the present, evil may win many times, but eventually there is this mechanism that we talked about in the previous classes. The evil has the seed of its own destruction. So eventually, because evil is a mistake, because evil is not really true, eventually evil will disappear. Now, the process of evil disappearing can be faster or slower, more traumatic or less traumatic. So what the adepts are doing is trying to smooth the process and to help in making this process faster as possible.
And one of the things, though, too, with evil is we look at it with our physical eyes. And so we see that, our whole lifetime there's been evil. But what we don't have the vision is the higher perspective to see that over the eons and eons, it's kind of like a bell-shaped curve. How much evil was there in the beginning of humanity? How much evil is there in a room full of infants? And then as the life cycle goes on, the potentiality for evil may increase, but how many truly evil 95-year-olds are there?
Mm-hmm. And in the Theosophical view, there is not this evil. This is a problem with our religious conditioning that most of us absorb. In the Theosophical view, evil is not regarded as something unnatural that should never be there. Evil is inevitable. Evil is just imperfection. And because things are not created, they don't start by being perfect. Because things evolve, they start by being imperfect. So evil is necessary, and not only, or inevitable, but not only inevitable, evil is also necessary, because it is through evil that we can realize what truth is, what goodness is. Of course, there needs to be a balance. Too much evil can lead to, let's say, the destruction of the soul, never of the spirit, which is eternal. So there is always this dance that seems to be going on a cosmic place, this balance between good and evil. But the masters talk about the forces of evil as the brothers of the shadow. And they say they are also co-workers of nature, and they have their function to fulfill.
But I just want to reiterate what you said. There is a certain point where evil can no longer pass.
Mm-hmm.
Supposing he were not tolerant and had not learned to sympathize with the weaknesses he had conquered, what then would be his position among men when he was able to see their thoughts, to read their failings, and when those characters we veil from each other beneath the outer appearance were no longer veiled to him, so that he ever saw what people were instead of what they appear to be in the outer world? Surely it would not be the right that such a power, and it is one of the lowest on the path, should be placed in the hands of anyone who has not learned to sympathize with the weakest and give help and compassion. I was in a meeting at work one time, and we were doing just a little warm-up exercise, and the question was, what superpower would you have? And the person next to me, she said, I would have the superpower to make all your thoughts be spoken out loud. And I had a complete panic attack right then and there, because I had to stop the conversation, because I couldn't imagine all my thoughts being out loud, that it would just be a complete disaster. So that's made me think of that there are these fail-safes put in at certain points until humanity truly has the maturity to use and the wisdom to use these powers for.
There are even movies where this has been presented. What would happen if a person could never lie, for example, and say everything that the person is thinking or feeling, or people who can hear the thoughts of others. And you can see how difficult that is.
They always are a disaster.
Yeah.
They always are a disaster.
So there are several aspects to this particular power that would make life really difficult, not only for that person, but for others. First, that we tend to get, if this person is a person that is not tolerant, that doesn't have compassion, that doesn't have this deeper understanding, we normally get upset when a situation or a person does something that we regard as wrong. So imagine you having the ability to see all the failings of all the people around. You would be constantly angry. You would be constantly irritated. You would become aggressive. It would be intolerable to live in the world. And this is something that people don't realize when they think that they want to develop, psychic powers. This is all part of the package. As we grow, we begin more and more to have this as Annie Besant is one of the lower powers, in which you can just sense the quality of person that you are relating to. And that is something very hard. It's easy to be nice with everybody when you see no fault anywhere. You see only beauty everywhere. But to see only beauty everywhere requires a maturation that Annie Besant says those who go through the first initiation must have. Otherwise, life becomes intolerable. So that is one aspect.
It makes me think that, so we have the power right now to see what people present to us. And then with those psychic powers, we may have the power to see beyond that. But then with the powers of the adept or the powers of the disciple, we can see beyond that to see the divine spark. And that's what we can deal with. It's that middle ground there that's kind of the scary.
Yeah. And then the other aspect is that when you have this ability to understand how people are, it's very easy to manipulate them. It's very easy. So a person that gains these powers, that person can manipulate everybody around and can become a really negative force in nature.
And we talked about this. This to me, this is a point of black magic. So somebody who and politicians do it. We see people whose job it is to win. So in whatever job whatever work they have. And so, but they clearly have the power to manipulate, or clearly have the power to see what humanity wants. It's the ads that say, buy me, buy me, buy me, or showing, cigarettes to kids, that type of things. Right is it that there should be comparatively little left, at least of these ordinary faults of men, ere he steps within that mighty temple where there is room only for the helpers and the servants and the lovers of mankind. And the task he has to do is so gigantic that fair progress is necessary ere he puts his hand to it at all, to get rid of every trace of human weakness and to develop the powers which place within reach all knowledge that can be gained within the limits of our system, so that by merely turning the attention anywhere is known everything that can be known. For that and nothing else than that is the position of the adept.
So the masters, they have the ability, as Annie Besant says there, they have awakened to the fullest possible extent what we call the spiritual intuition. That is a direct perception of the essence of the things that the adept puts his or her attention on. So eventually, when it is said that the adepts are omniscient, it's not that they have in their brain the information of everything that can happen within the system, the solar system, let's say. The omniscience is in the sense that they can access this state of divine wisdom by which they can understand thoroughly and the essence of anything that they put their attention on. So that is part of the flowering of what a human being is potentially. But before getting there, we need to work on all these other aspects.
And that's that seeing past the personality, past the psychic, onto the divine spirit. That's what they're able to see it all, assimilate all that, and then know what to do with it.
Well, Annie Blavatsky, in a writing, she says, of course, I see that most of humanity is just like a black charcoal, but within each charcoal, there is at least an atom of diamond, and I choose to fix my eyes on that diamond, on the atom of diamond. And I think she was referring to this. The Patanjali says, for example, that when a person begins to develop wisdom, that person begins to realize more and more how, or realize the sorrow in the world or the limitations in people. So Blavatsky, I think, was talking about this. She had the ability to see the limitations in matter, but she also had the ability to see the essence that Michele was talking about. And she was able to fix her eyes there, because when we see a person, we can see the virtues and the weaknesses. And what do we normally do? We fix our eyes on the weaknesses. We become intolerant with the weaknesses of a person. and we are not able to recognize the virtues. This is just how the personal nature operates. So we need to get over that before all this.
And Patanjali was a Hindu sage?
Yeah, studied the school that we know as Raja Yoga.
And Deborah asks, if I understand it right, much of this path is on the inner planes and the personality is unaware of this. So can this power the soul gains be used in a negative way in the material world?
At the level that we are talking about now, the personality and the soul have been united in a sense. Although the soul always knows far more than the personality, or the perception of the soul is far wider than the perception of the personality. At this point, the personality is a reflection of the soul. Within the limitations of what a personality can be, the personality is reflecting the soul. So this is this idea that all this happens on the inner planes can be for earlier stages. The soul is developing and learning, and the personality may not be aware of that. Although this is why the Theosophical approach puts emphasis on working on the personal level too, so that whatever growth the soul is going, or that is going on at the level of the soul, can be shown through the personality, because we are consciously working also at the level of the personality.
So to help with this, in our example of the mountain, wouldn't you say that as we're climbing the mountain, although we're being influenced by our higher nature, it's our ambitions or our personality that may be driving us, and therefore it could come out as evil or negative influences. But once we get into the outer court, that is more unlikely.
Mm-hmm. In general, evil comes from developing the personality too much, more than the soul. Whenever the soul is really being developed, somehow the presence of the soul has the ability at least to cause conflict in the personality when the personality does something wrong. And that serves as some kind of protection. But in people who are very materialistic, or there is a way to overdevelop the personality with a soul that is not so mature, and that is the path that can lead to evil.
And we can see that today we prize intelligence, but intelligence isn't always a protector or a key of goodness. Those don't necessarily go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So, since nothing less than that achievement has to be accomplished, since not the slightest trace of human weakness nor of human ignorance must cling to the Arhat, who is ready for the final initiation, no wonder that before the threshold is crossed, there is much for men to do. No wonder that the foundation which is to support the weight of so mighty a building must be made strong and firm.
So this is, basically what she is postulating here.
One of the vast gains that he will have obtained in crossing over the threshold will be the gaining of a consciousness which shall not again be broken, over which death shall not have power, over which birth can no longer draw the sponge of oblivion. Within the temple, the self-consciousness is an unbroken knowledge, so that the soul can look before and after and feel itself strong in the knowledge of the immortal self.
So this is part of what happens with the initiations, that continuity of consciousness that comes from the soul is maintained also when the soul is expressing through the body in what we call the personality. So in these last lifetimes, there is more of this sense, the soul is born, and there is a strong sense of the work to be done. And that allows the soul to work effectively instead of wasting, a lot of time pursuing things that the soul has already realized are not worth pursuing.
So this unbroken consciousness, this would be similar to if we were able to sleep at night and remember what we do on the inner planes. That would be.
Yes, this is a quite complex subject because on a principle, there is this continuity, as a principle, this continuity of consciousness. But then there are many other factors that are also involved, and people grow in different ways, and there may be even an initiate that for until that person attains like the third initiation, the structure of the body may be such that that continuity of consciousness does not manifest quite clearly through the brain consciousness. In other people, that may happen from the first initiation. So there is some wiggle room, but as a general principle, this is part of what happens.
And these stages that are to be trodden under these conditions, these steps that are yet to be taken, and these fetters that are still to be cast off, as we look at them, we see that one after another, the last phases of human weaknesses are disappearing, and the soul shines out strong and calm and pure. The delusion of the lower self is falling away, and all men are seen as one with the true self.
So this is what we can call enlightenment, which in the Theosophical view, there are different levels of enlightenment. There is a deeper and ever deepening realization of this idea of the oneness with the true self.
What is in its ending? Those only can tell who have ended. What is at its goal? Those only may know who stand there. But even those who are treading its earlier stages know that its sorrow is joy as compared with the joy of earth. One gleam of the light which shines always upon it, and that grows ever brighter as the disciple treads onwards. One gleam of that makes all earth's sunshine but as darkness. They who tread it know the peace that passeth understanding, the joy that earthly sorrow can never take away, the rest that is on the rock that no earthquake may shiver, the place within the temple where forever there is bliss.
So this bliss that, as we were saying, that we talk about, is there as a more permanent experience towards the end of the path. And even there, as Annie Besant says here, there is a joy that the earthly sorrow can never take away. That implies there are earthly sorrows, but they are not important enough or strong enough to blur that inner sense of peace. Because when we say joy, we should not think of pleasure, excitement. There is a problem always when we try to define these feelings. If you see how Annie Besant tends to talk about this, she relates joy more to peace, certainty, contentment, equanimity, more than with excitement, with, oh, I'm so happy. And so there is, the soul attains this place of poise, which whether the soul is experiencing through the personality what we call joy and sorrow or pleasure and pain, those are superficial. The inner peace is never forgotten, never shaken. And so the more the soul realizes all this, the stronger that experience is. All right, so this is it. Yes, I think, if you, as we have been saying during the classes, the book contains more things. We try to get like the essence of each chapter. So if you are interested in this, we recommend you to read the book.
And thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We hope to see you in the next webinar. Check out the other webinars that we are doing. Go to the website, the theosophical.org, look at programs and webinars, and then see if there is anything else that you would like to participate in. Okay.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.